If your family forced you to sacrifice your child for someone else's benefit, what would you do? Welcome to Revenge Mode. And this is the story I want to tell you. Cover my brother's luxury honeymoon with your daughter's medical fund, my dad demanded. My son deserves it more. My mom sided with them and called me ungrateful, so I took my revenge in a way they never saw coming. I'm Nadine, 34, a single mom and a senior accountant here in Indianapolis. I rebuilt my life from zero after my divorce, working 14-hour days, wearing old clothes, and cutting every personal expense. All that sacrifice was for one single purpose: to save every penny for my daughter's spinal surgery, costing tens of thousands of dollars scheduled for next month. But the tragedy is to my own flesh and blood. I'm not a mother fighting for her child. I'm just a walking ATM, nothing more. If you want to see the satisfying conclusion for greedy people who dare to profit from others' pain, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon right now. Your support helps us bring you more compelling stories. Thank you. It started on a cold, rainy Tuesday night. I had just soothed my daughter to sleep after her back pain flared up when my phone rang. The screen showed my mom's name. No, how are you? Just her cold, commanding voice. Come home immediately. There's a serious matter concerning the honor of this entire family. I drove into the night, but honestly, I didn't feel scared for anyone's safety. With the instinct of a veteran finance professional and the experience of dealing with a brother my parents had spoiled since childhood, I suspected this was just another money trap. Deep down, I still hoped I was wrong, hoped my parents actually remembered their sick granddaughter. But the moment I turned into the driveway, my headlights swept over a shiny new sports car parked arrogantly out front, the kind my brother rented just to show off. My heart tightened, not from fear, but from anger. I clutched my purse tight and took a deep breath. I knew it. I was prepared for a begging charade, but I couldn't have predicted the level of cruelty they were about to throw in my face. I pushed open the heavy oak front door, expecting chaos. I expected to see paramedics, or perhaps Leon lying on the sofa with a cast on his leg, or Dad pacing frantically with news of a lawsuit. The urgency in Mom's voice over the phone had suggested a catastrophe that threatened the very foundation of our lives. Instead, I was greeted by the smell of potpourri and roast beef. The living room was warm, illuminated by the soft glow of the expensive crystal chandelier my parents had bought last year, instead of fixing their leaking roof. And there, sitting comfortably on the leather recliner, was Leon. He wasn't injured. He wasn't sick. He was wearing a crisp white linen shirt unbuttoned at the top to show off a gold chain, and he was swirling a glass of Dad's vintage Cabernet. He looked like he was posing for a lifestyle magazine, not facing a life-or-death crisis. Dad Patrick was standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking solemn. Mom Marilyn sat on the adjacent sofa, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue, though her makeup remained perfectly intact. "You're okay," I said, the adrenaline in my veins instantly turning into a cold, hard knot of suspicion. Mom said it was a matter of survival. "It is," Dad said, his voice grave. He gestured to the coffee table. "Sit down, Nadine. We have a situation." I didn't sit. I stayed standing near the entryway, keeping my distance. On the coffee table right next to Leon's feet, which were propped up in Italian loafers, sat a glossy trifold brochure. The cover featured an aerial shot of overwater bungalows sitting atop turquoise water. The St. Regis, Maldives. "Fawn is threatening to call it off," Leon said, taking a slow sip of wine. He didn't even look at me. He was studying the ruby liquid in his glass as if he were a sommelier. "She says if the honeymoon isn't up to her standards, she's walking. She refuses to start her married life in mediocrity." Her words. "She wants the Maldives," Dad clarified, pointing a thick finger at the brochure. "The Vamuli resort. It's the only way to save the wedding, to save our reputation. You know, Fawn comes from a prominent family. If this wedding falls through because we couldn't provide, we'll be the laughingstock of Indianapolis." I blinked, trying to process the absurdity of the sentence. So let me get this straight. The emergency is a vacation. It is $25,000 for the package? Mom interjected, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility she always used to manipulate situations. Leon doesn't have the liquidity right now because his assets are tied up in investments. And Dad and I are on a fixed income. Investments, I repeated, looking at Leon. He finally glanced at me, a smirk playing on his lips. We both knew his investments were likely online sports betting accounts and depreciation on that rented sports car outside. We need you to cover it, Dad said. It wasn't a question. It was a directive. You're the only one with cash on hand. Write the check tonight so Leon can book it. We can't risk Fawn changing her mind. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it was a bitter, angry sound. You want me to pay $25,000 for a holiday, Dad? You know exactly where my savings are allocated. That is Genevieve's surgery fund. Her operation is in 3 weeks. We aren't asking you to gift it, Dad said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. Call it a family loan, an investment in your brother's future happiness. I don't have $25,000 of disposable income, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. Every cent in that account is for the orthopedic surgeon and the hospital bills. If I withdraw it, Genevieve doesn't get her spine fixed. She stays in that brace. She stays in pain. The answer is no. The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Leon set his wineglass down on the table with a sharp clink. The bored expression vanished, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. You are being dramatic, Nadine, Leon said. He sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees, looking at me with the condescending patience one uses with a slow child. You are a mother. You understand what sacrifice means. You do it all the time. I sacrifice for necessities, I snapped, not for 5-star overwater villas. Genevieve's back just hurts a little. Leon continued, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of empathy. Let's be real. It's not life-threatening. She's 8. She's resilient. Waiting another year won't kill her. She can keep wearing the brace. It's uncomfortable, sure, but it's manageable. I stared at him, my mouth slightly open. I couldn't believe he was actually saying these words. But this, Leon gestured to himself, then to the brochure. If I lose Fawn, I lose everything. My social standing, my connections, my future. This is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. Genevieve's back is just a medical delay. You need to prioritize the actual emergency here. Disgust, hot and bile-like, rose in my throat. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to reprimand him. Waiting for them to tell him how dare he compare a child's physical suffering to a luxury trip. But Dad just nodded in agreement. Your brother makes a valid point, Nadine. Genevieve is young. Bones heal. But a marriage opportunity like this, it doesn't come around twice. You are unbelievable, I whispered, shaking my head. You are asking a mother to choose between her daughter's health and her brother's ego. Don't you dare make this about morality, Mom snapped. Her sorrowful mask had fallen away, revealing the bitter woman underneath. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. This is about you being jealous. Don't let the envy of a bitter single mother blind you to your duty. I froze. Excuse me. You heard me, Mom spat. You failed at your marriage. You couldn't keep a husband. Now you can't stand seeing Leon happy and successful. You want to sabotage him because you're miserable and alone. Don't drag your brother down into the mud just because you couldn't make it work. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It wasn't just greed, it was malice. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a failed resource that needed to be tapped for the golden child. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold clarity wash over me, freezing the anger into something sharp and dangerous. I looked at the brochure on the table, then at Leon's smug face, and finally at my parents' judgmental glares. Genevieve is my daughter, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. And I will protect her from everyone, including the vultures in this room. You won't see a single penny. Not for the Maldives, not for a motel. You walk out that door, Nadine. Dad threatened, his face turning a shade of purple. And you are turning your back on this family. No, Dad, I said, gripping the doorknob. I'm just turning my back on the parasites. I stepped out into the cold night air and slammed the door shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. My hands were shaking as I walked to my car, but not from fear. I knew them. I knew that silence inside the house didn't mean they had given up. It meant they were plotting their next move. 48 hours after I walked out of my parents' house, the silence I desperately hoped for never came. Instead, the noise just changed frequency. I was sitting in my corner office on Thursday morning, the gray Indianapolis skyline looming outside my window. My desk was buried under quarterly tax reports, the kind of meticulous high-stakes work that required absolute focus. But focus was impossible. My personal cell phone, which I usually kept on silent during work hours, was vibrating incessantly against the mahogany desktop. It started with Aunt Betty. She was my mother's older sister, a woman who usually only called on birthdays or when she needed tax advice. I made the mistake of answering the first call, thinking maybe someone in the extended family had heard the truth and wanted to offer support. I was wrong. Nadine. Betty's voice was sharp, lacking any greeting. I just got off the phone with your mother. Marilyn is beside herself. She's been crying for 2 days straight. Aunt Betty, if this is about the honeymoon, it is about you breaking a promise. She interrupted, her tone dripping with judgment. Your mother told me everything. How you promised Leon that trip months ago as a wedding gift. How you waited until the very last minute to pull the rug out from under him just to humiliate him. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. That is a lie. I never promised anything. They demanded $25,000 from Genevieve's surgery fund. Oh, stop using that child as a shield, Betty scoffed. Marilyn told me the doctors said the surgery is cosmetic. She said you're just hoarding the money because you're bitter. Just because your own husband couldn't stand to stay with you doesn't mean you have to destroy your brother's happiness. It's ugly, Nadine. Pure jealousy doesn't suit you. I hung up. I didn't even say goodbye. My chest heaved as I stared at the phone. Cosmetic. They were telling people my daughter's spinal reconstruction was cosmetic. They were weaponizing my divorce, painting me as a scorned, lonely woman trying to sabotage true love. I blocked Aunt Betty. Then I blocked 2 cousins who sent text messages calling me selfish and cold-hearted. By lunch, I was completely isolated. The family I had spent my life trying to please had successfully quarantined me. I sat alone in my office eating a cold sandwich, feeling the walls closing in. I had no husband to vent to, no partner to hold my hand. It was just me against a coordinated assault. But the emotional battering was just the softening up for the artillery strike. At 2:15 p.m., a notification popped up on my screen. It was a text from Leon. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the glass. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, but my instinct warned me that ignorance could be dangerous. I opened the message. It wasn't an apology. It was a picture of a drafted email. I zoomed in, and as I read the text, the blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. The draft was addressed to the board of directors of my company, specifically copying the CEO and the head of HR. The subject line read, "Formal complaint regarding unethical financial conduct of CFO Nadine." Under the image, Leon had typed a message, "If you don't bring the check to the rehearsal dinner on Saturday night, Dad hits send." The email accuses you of embezzling family trust funds to maintain your lifestyle. It details discrepancies in accounts Dad claims you manage for him. You are a chief accountant, sis. You know what an accusation like this does. Even if it's a lie, the investigation alone will kill your reputation. They'll suspend you pending the audit. No job means no health insurance. No insurance means no surgery for the little cripple. Your choice. I dropped the phone on my desk as if it were burning hot. The room seemed to spin. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a calculated nuclear strike on my livelihood. Leon and Dad knew exactly where to hit. In my profession, integrity is the only currency that matters. An accusation of embezzlement, especially coming from one's own father, would trigger an immediate internal investigation. I would be placed on administrative leave. The rumors would spread through the Indianapolis financial community within hours. My career, which I had built brick by brick to support my daughter, would be over. And the most terrifying part was the leverage. If I lost my job, I lost the company health insurance plan that was covering 80% of Genevieve's surgery. Without that insurance, the $25,000 I had saved wouldn't cover even a third of the bill. They were holding my daughter's spine hostage. Tears, hot and stinging, welled up in my eyes. I put my head in my hands, gasping for air. The unfairness of it was suffocating. I had done everything right. I worked hard. I saved. I raised my daughter alone. And now the people who were supposed to love me were willing to destroy my entire existence just so Leon could sleep in an overwater villa for a week. They are going to win, a voice whispered in my head. You have to pay them. I reached for the checkbook in my purse, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I could write the check. I could stop the email. I could save my job. But then my eyes landed on a framed photo on my desk. It was Genevieve smiling despite the bulky plastic brace visible under her t-shirt. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a break. It was a shift. The tears stopped flowing. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, smearing my mascara, but I didn't care. I looked at the phone again, reading Leon's threat one more time. Dad hit send. Accusing you of embezzling. Wait. I sat up straighter in my ergonomic chair. The panic began to recede, replaced by the cold, analytical mindset that made me excellent at my job. Leon was threatening to destroy his source of income. Why people with money don't blackmail their sisters for $25,000. People with leverage don't act this desperate. This wasn't the behavior of a man who just wanted a luxury upgrade. This was the behavior of a drowning man trying to climb on top of someone else to breathe. If he was this desperate for cash that he would risk a felony extortion charge, there was a reason. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I wasn't just a victim. I was an auditor. And I was going to audit Leon's life until I found the rot hiding underneath that shiny exterior. I picked up my phone not to call them, but to make a call to a private investigator I had used for corporate background checks. Hello, Mike. I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I need a full financial scrub on a subject. Rush job. I need everything by tomorrow night. Debts, lines, gambling records. Everything. I hung up and looked out the window at the gray sky. They wanted a war. They just declared one on the wrong accountant. The private investigator's report hit my encrypted inbox at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. I opened the PDF, and within seconds the image of Leon as a successful car dealer evaporated, replaced by a portrait of a man drowning in his own incompetence. Leon wasn't a partner at the dealership. He was a junior associate on a commission-only basis, and he hadn't sold a car in 2 months. But that was just the surface rot. The deep decay was in the credit report. He had maxed out 5 credit cards totaling $42,000 in debt. Even worse, there were suspicious recurring transfers to offshore accounts linked to unregulated sports betting sites. The urgency for the $25,000 suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't just for a luxury honeymoon to impress Fawn. It was a desperate liquidity injection. He likely needed to pay off a bookie or make a minimum payment to keep the creditors from seizing his leased sports car before the wedding. He was trying to use my daughter's spinal surgery money to plug the holes in his sinking ship. I saved the file to a flash drive. I had the motive. Now I needed the crime. At 1 p.m., I pulled into my parents' driveway. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, practicing my best defeated expression. I needed them to believe I was beaten, that the threat to my career had worked. Mom opened the door, her face lighting up with triumphant smugness when she saw my slump-shouldered posture. "I knew you'd come around," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "You finally realized that family comes first." "I'm here to discuss the arrangement," I said quietly, walking into the living room. Dad was sitting in his armchair looking like a king who had just crushed a rebellion. "Good. I'm glad you stopped being hysterical, Nadine. Leon is your brother. Helping him isn't a burden, it's a privilege. I just, I don't have the full amount liquid right now." I lied, testing the waters. "It requires selling assets. It's hard." "We all make sacrifices," Dad said, shaking his head solemnly. "You think this wedding is cheap? I've had to dip into my retirement. I even sold some of the old collectibles in the study just to cover the deposit for the venue. We are all stripping ourselves bare for this boy's happiness. Why should you be the exception?" I froze. Sold some of the old collectibles. A cold chill shot down my spine. Dad didn't have collectibles. He had junk. The only thing of real value in this house besides the house itself was Grandpa's vintage 1970s Rolex Submariner. It was an heirloom specifically left to Genevieve in Grandpa's will, intended to be her nest egg when she turned 18. Dad had insisted on keeping it in his wall safe for security reasons, because I lived in an apartment. "You sold collectibles?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Just odds and ends?" Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Now about the check. Can you bring it tomorrow?" "I need to use the restroom," I said abruptly, standing up. "My stomach is in knots." "Go ahead," Mom said, not looking up from her magazine. "But don't take too long. We need to plan the handover." I walked down the hallway, but I didn't go to the bathroom. I slipped into the study. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I went straight to the painting of the hunting dogs and swung it aside to reveal the wall safe. I held my breath and typed in the code 1980, Leon's birth year. It beeped green. Of course, they never changed it. I pulled the heavy door open. The safe was cluttered with deeds and passports, but my eyes went instantly to the small velvet box on the top shelf. I grabbed it. It felt light. Too light. I snapped the lid open. Empty. The watch was gone. A $15,000 heirloom, my daughter's property, vanished. I closed the safe and put the painting back. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to know who did it. Dad said he sold collectibles, but Dad was a hoarder. He never let go of anything. Leon, however, was desperate. I left the study and quietly opened the door to Leon's old bedroom, which he was using as a staging ground for the wedding. It was a mess of suit bags and shoe boxes. I scanned the room looking for anything, a receipt, a slip, a note. My eyes landed on the wastebasket near the desk. It was overflowing with tags from new clothes. I dug through the layers of cardboard and plastic. Near the bottom, stained with coffee grounds, was a yellow slip of paper. I smoothed it out. Indie pawn and gold. Item Rolex Submariner 5513. Customer Leon Miller. Date October 14th. 2 weeks ago. He had stolen it. He had stolen Genevieve's inheritance to fund his gambling or his wedding, and now he was trying to extort me for more. I pocketed the receipt and flushed the toilet in the hallway bathroom to maintain my cover. I walked back into the living room, my face a mask of calm. "I'll have the check ready for the rehearsal dinner tomorrow," I told Dad. "I want to give it to him in front of everyone, to show my support." "That's a wonderful idea," Mom beamed. "A public gesture will really shut the relatives up." "Oh, it will definitely do that," I said. 30 minutes later, I walked into the central precinct. I didn't go to the front desk. I asked for Detective Miller, a friend of my former boss whom I had met at company functions. I laid the pawn ticket, a copy of Grandpa's will proving Genevieve's ownership, and the PI's report on the desk. This is grand larceny, I said, my voice hard. The value is over $15,000. He stole it from a safe and pawned it. Detective Miller looked at the documents, then at me. We can pick him up today, Nadine. We have enough for an arrest warrant with this ticket. No, I said. If you pick him up today, my parents will bail him out before the ink is dry, and they'll spin a story that I framed him. They'll destroy my reputation before the trial starts. What do you want to do? He's going to be at the Prime Steakhouse tomorrow night at 7 p.m., I said. I'm going to confront him with this evidence in front of witnesses. I need you to be there. When he admits it, or when I prove he did it, I want him handcuffed in front of his fiancé's family. I want no ambiguity. I want no way for them to lie their way out of it. Miller tapped his pen on the desk, considering it. We can't participate in a dramatic reveal, Nadine, but if you are filing a formal report of theft and you are telling us the location of the suspect, we are obligated to execute the warrant, if that happens to be at a dinner that's on him. That's all I ask, I said. Just be ready. I walked out of the station. The trap was set. They wanted a show for the rehearsal dinner. I was going to give them a performance they would never forget. The private dining room at Prime Steakhouse smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and expensive perfume. It was a sensory overload of wealth, or at least the appearance of it. Crystal flutes of champagne clinked softly against the backdrop of low jazz, and the lighting was dimmed to a romantic golden hue. It was the perfect stage for a fairy tale, which made what I was about to do feel almost like blasphemy. I sat at a table near the back, nursing a glass of iced water. I wore a crimson dress, a deliberate choice. I wasn't here to mourn the loss of my family. I was here to burn the infection out. At the head table, Leon looked like a prince in his bespoke tuxedo. He was laughing loudly, clinking glasses with Fawn's father, a wealthy real estate developer from Chicago. My parents, Patrick and Marilyn, were seated on Leon's other side, beaming with a pride that looked grotesque to me. They kept glancing in my direction, their eyes darting to the thick leather portfolio resting on my lap. They assumed it contained the check for $25,000. They assumed I had capitulated, beaten into submission by their threats against my career. Let them think that for 5 more minutes. The dinner service was winding down. Waiters in white gloves cleared away the plates of filet mignon and sea bass. A hush fell over the room as Fawn stood up, tapping her spoon against her champagne flute. The sound was sharp, piercing the murmur of conversation. Fawn looked radiant, I had to admit. She was young, beautiful, and completely oblivious. She held the microphone with a manicured hand, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Fawn began, her voice trembling with emotion. She looked down at Leon with absolute adoration. Growing up, I always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, but I never thought I'd find a real-life Prince Charming. Leon isn't just handsome, he's the most generous, stable man I've ever met. She paused to wipe a tear, and the room let out a collective "aw." I am so lucky, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Leon promised me a life like a queen. He told me that with him, I would never have to worry about a bill, never have to stress about the future. We are going to have a beautiful home, beautiful children, and a life where money is never an obstacle, only a tool for our happiness. To my future husband, thank you for making me feel so secure. The room erupted in applause. Leon stood up and kissed her hand, soaking in the admiration. He looked smug. He looked untouchable. It was the perfect cue. My father, Patrick, stood up next. He took the microphone from Fawn, his chest puffed out. That was beautiful, Fawn. And speaking of generosity and family support, we have one more special moment before dessert. My daughter Nadine has a special gift she wants to present to the happy couple. A contribution to kickstart this beautiful life you just described. He gestured toward me, his eyes hard and warning. Get up here and pay up, his stare said. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every eye in the room turned to me. I picked up my leather portfolio and walked toward the small stage where a laptop was set up to run the slideshow of the couple's childhood photos. I didn't walk like a defeated sister. I walked with the rhythmic precision of an auditor approaching a crime scene. I stepped up to the podium. Dad reached out to take the portfolio, expecting the check. I pulled it back. "I'll handle this, Dad," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone. It was steady, cold, and devoid of warmth. Dad frowned, confused, but he stepped back. I turned to Fawn. She was smiling at me, expecting a speech about sisterly love and a fat envelope of cash. I looked at her, and for a split second the anger vanished, replaced by a deep, genuine pity. She was just collateral damage in Leon's con. "You just talked about the future, Fawn," I said softly into the mic. "You talked about security, about never worrying about money. That is a beautiful dream." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "But I'm an accountant," I continued, my tone sharpening, "and I deal in facts, not dreams. So before you say I do tomorrow, let me show you the real future." I opened my portfolio, took out a flash drive, and plugged it into the laptop connected to the oversized projector screen behind us. The romantic slideshow of Leon and Fawn holding hands on a beach disappeared. In its place, a high-resolution PDF appeared on the 10-foot screen. It was a credit report. The header clearly read, "Subject Leon Patrick Miller." Gasps rippled through the room. "What is this?" Fawn's father stood up, squinting at the screen. "This," I said, pointing to the columns of red ink, "is Leon's current financial standing. He isn't a partner at the dealership, Fawn. He's a junior associate on commission, and he hasn't sold a car in 8 weeks. But that's the good news." I clicked the remote. The slide changed. "This is a list of his active liabilities. He has maxed out 5 credit cards. He has a personal loan with an interest rate of 28%. And here," I highlighted a section with a laser pointer, "are $40,000 in gambling debts owed to offshore sports betting sites." "Nadine, stop this immediately!" Mom screamed from the table, lunging forward. Dad tried to grab the laptop, but Fawn's father stepped in his way. "Sit down, Patrick," Fawn's father growled. "I want to see this." "He told you money would never be an obstacle," I said to Fawn, whose face had gone pale white. He was right. Money isn't an obstacle for him because he doesn't have any. He's drowning. He needed $25,000 for your honeymoon, not because he's generous, but because he's broke. "That's a lie," Leon yelled, finally finding his voice. "She cooked those books. She's jealous." "Am I?" I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed to a scanned image of a yellow slip of paper. It was grainy, magnified 100 times, but the text was unmistakable. "Indie Pawn and Gold. Item: vintage Rolex Submariner. Seller: Leon Miller. My daughter Genevieve has a severe spinal condition." I said, my voice finally cracking with the rage I had suppressed for days. "My grandfather left her one thing to pay for her future, a vintage watch. My father kept it in his safe." I looked directly at Leon. He shrank back, looking like a cornered rat. "2 weeks ago, Leon stole that watch from his own parents' safe," I said, enunciating every word. "He pawned a disabled child's inheritance for $15,000, not to pay for your ring, Fawn, but to pay the interest on his gambling debt so his car wouldn't get repossessed." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and violent. Fawn stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, trying to reconcile her Prince Charming with the petty thief on the projector. "This man doesn't have a dime," I said, dropping the microphone onto the podium with a loud thud. "He just stole from his disabled niece to trick you. Welcome to the family." I unplugged my flash drive. The screen went black, plunging the room into a stunned darkness before the ambient lights seemed to flicker back into focus. But the damage was done. The truth hung in the air like smoke, choking everyone who had breathed the lie for so long. I stepped off the stage and walked past my parents. Dad was purple with rage, clutching his chest. Mom looked like a ghost. But I didn't stop. I walked straight toward the exit, knowing that the explosion I had just triggered was about to blow the roof off the building. The explosion I expected didn't come from the speakers. It came from the head table. Fawn moved faster than I thought possible in her heels. She didn't cry. She didn't faint. She turned to Leon, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Crack. The sound of her hand connecting with Leon's cheek was so sharp it silenced the few whispers remaining in the room. Leon stumbled back, clutching his face, looking at her with wide, shocked eyes. "You liar!" Fawn screamed, her voice breaking. "You told me you were an investor. You told me you owned the dealership. I defended you to my father. I look like a fool for you." "Baby, listen, she's lying. It's a setup." Leon stammered, reaching for her arm. "Don't touch me." Fawn recoiled as if he were contagious. She yanked the 3-carat diamond ring, which I now suspected was either fake or bought on credit, off her finger. She threw it at him with such force that it bounced off his chest and skittered across the hardwood floor. "We are done. My father was right about you. You're nothing but a fraud." Fawn's father stood up, signaling to his wife and guests. "We are leaving. Now." The humiliation was total. Leon stood there, red-faced, stripped of his lies, in front of the people he desperately wanted to impress. He looked around the room, seeing the judgment in everyone's eyes, and then his gaze landed on me. I was standing near the exit, watching the house of cards collapse. His expression shifted from shame to homicidal rage. "You!" he roared, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You ruined my life." He lunged. He knocked over his chair and sprinted toward me, his hands curled into fists. "I'm going to kill you." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Before he could get within 10 feet of me, 2 men in dark suits who had been waiting by the bar stepped forward. Detective Miller moved with practiced efficiency. He intercepted Leon, grabbed his arm, and spun him around, slamming him chest first against a pillar. "Leon Miller." Detective Miller's voice boomed over the chaos. "You are under arrest for grand larceny and fraud." "Get off me!" Leon struggled, kicking wildly. "You can't arrest me. It's my rehearsal dinner." "You have the right to remain silent." Miller continued, pulling Leon's wrists behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Dad, Mom, do something." Leon screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched panic as the reality of the steel cuffs set in. "They're taking me. Help me." Dad was paralyzed, clutching the table, gasping for air as Fawn's family filed past him with looks of disgust. But Mom... Marilyn's reaction was visceral. Seeing her golden child in handcuffs shattered her. The arrogance, the cruelty, the composure, it all evaporated instantly. She scrambled out of her chair, knocking over a glass of wine that stained the white tablecloth like blood. She ran toward us, not to attack me, but to stop the police. "No, no, you can't take him," she wailed, grabbing Detective Miller's arm. "He's a good boy. It's a misunderstanding. Put him down." "Ma'am, step back or you will be arrested for obstruction," Miller warned firmly. Marilyn looked at the detective, then at Leon's terrified face, and finally she turned to me. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She collapsed. Right there on the dirty floor of the restaurant, in her expensive evening gown, my mother fell to her knees. She crawled the few feet to where I stood and grabbed the hem of my red dress. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. "Nadine, please," she sobbed, her voice raw and pathetic. "Tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake. He's your brother. He's your baby brother." I looked down at her. This was the woman who had sneered at me 2 days ago. This was the woman who called me a failure. "He stole from Genevieve, Mom," I said coldly. "He stole from a disabled child." "He'll pay it back," she begged, clutching my legs. We'll find the money. Just don't let him go to jail. Please, Nadine, have a heart. Family protects family. I'm begging you. The restaurant was silent now, save for Leon's whimpering and Mom's sobbing. Everyone was watching the mother beg the daughter she had tormented. I felt a ghost of the old Nadine, the one who wanted her mother's approval, try to surface. But then I thought of Genevieve's brace. I thought of the nights I held her while she cried from back pain. I thought of the text message threatening my job. I leaned down slightly, bringing my face close to hers so she could see there was no mercy left in my eyes. When you forced me to sacrifice Genevieve's spine for his vacation, I asked softly, my voice cutting through her sobs like a razor, did you kneel to me? Marilyn froze her mouth open, breath hitching. Did you beg for my daughter's health? I continued, my voice remaining steady and devoid of vibration. No. You called me bitter. You threatened my job. You chose your son over my daughter's life. I pulled my dress from her grip and stepped back, looking down at her as if she were a stranger. You made your choice, Marilyn. Now stand up and watch him go to prison. I nodded to Detective Miller. Take him. No, Nadine? Go. Leon screamed as they dragged him out the door. Marilyn collapsed completely onto the floor, wailing into her hands. I turned my back on the wreckage of my former family and walked out into the cool night air, never once looking back. 6 months have passed since the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers illuminated the parking lot of the Prime Steakhouse. The seasons in Indianapolis have shifted from the biting cold of that winter to a warm, vibrant spring, mirroring the change in my own home. Yesterday, I watched Genevieve run across the playground at Eagle Creek Park. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't wearing the bulky, rigid plastic brace. The surgery at Riley Hospital was a complete success. The doctors inserted 2 titanium rods to straighten her spine, and almost overnight, my little girl grew 2 inches taller. She isn't in pain anymore. She runs with a slight stiffness still, but she runs free. That sight alone, her laughter ringing out as she chased a kite, was worth every bridge I had to burn. My career didn't crumble as Leon had threatened. In fact, the opposite happened. After the arrest made the local news, the scandal that my parents feared would ruin me actually solidified my reputation. My CEO called me into his office a week after the incident. He didn't fire me. He commended me. He told me that a CFO who wouldn't compromise her ethics for her own brother was exactly the kind of person he wanted guarding the company's assets. I received a promotion and a raise that will help rebuild the savings I spent on Genevieve's recovery. As for the Miller family, the honor they tried so desperately to protect has been irrevocably stained. Leon is currently serving a 3-year sentence at the Plainfield Correctional Facility. He took a plea deal for grand larceny and fraud to avoid a longer trial. Fawn testified against him regarding the fake financial documents he had shown her. She has since moved back to Chicago, erasing him from her life as if he never existed. But the true weight of the punishment fell on Patrick and Marilyn. The legal fees to defend Leon were astronomical. Combined with the restitution they were court-ordered to pay me for the stolen Rolex, which I immediately sold to fund Genevieve's physical therapy, and the mountain of gambling debts Leon had hidden under their address, they were financially gutted. They had to sell the big colonial house in the suburbs. They sold the crystal chandelier, the leather recliners, and the collectibles Dad loved so much. They downsized to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a noisy complex on the east side of town. I don't visit them to gloat. I don't drive by their apartment to see how far they've fallen. I simply blocked their numbers on the night of the arrest, and I never unblocked them. I heard from Aunt Betty, who finally apologized to me about their Thanksgiving last week. She told me it was the grimmest scene she had ever witnessed. Patrick and Marilyn sat at a small folding card table in their living room. There was a turkey, but it was too big for just 2 people. There was no laughter. There were no grandchildren running around. There was no Leon boasting about his fake success. There was just silence. a heavy, suffocating silence that filled the space where their family used to be. They spent the holiday staring at their plates aging rapidly in the quiet, surrounded by boxes of things they no longer had space for. They have no access to Genevieve. They will miss her graduation, her wedding, her life. They chose the son who stole from them, and in doing so, they lost the daughter who would have cared for them. That silence is their prison, and unlike Leon's, theirs has no release date. As I watched Genevieve pack up her kite, she ran over and hugged my waist. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely," I said, smoothing her hair. I realized then that I didn't lose my family that night at the steakhouse. I saved it. Family isn't defined by whose blood runs in your veins. It's defined by who is willing to bleed for you. Protecting my child was the red line, and crossing it led me to the only place that matters, here in the sun, free and at peace. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Nadine was too harsh on her mother, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Thanks for watching.